Thank you for tuning in to the Voice of the Victim podcast. We discuss a lot of sad and potentially triggering things on this show. We try to be as sensitive and cautious as possible, but if you are sensitive to things involving abuse and may be triggered, please think twice before listening to our show.
Hello listeners, Ryan here. I haven't done one of these intros in a while, but I just wanted to preface this episode with something because we're living in such tense and divisive times right now. First off, thank you all for being here. We appreciate each and every one of you, and we hope that you're all safe and healthy. We do speak about some very sensitive topics in this episode, but we want to reiterate that we are not experts on anything. We're just two people that try to talk about things we care about and tell as many stories as we can of people who either can't share their own story anymore or have survived an experience that we can learn from so we can do our part to prevent similar things from happening again. We try to remain as unbiased as possible, and instead of siding with a defined cause, we're on the side of life and peace and respect for all. So, that said, we hope that we did an okay job of telling this story. Welcome to the Voice of the Victim podcast. My name's Ryan.
And I'm Rosie.
How are you doing tonight, Rosie?
I'm good. I just ate a handful of cheese sticks and I'm ready to go.
Good to go.
How are you?
I'm pretty well. Just living my life.
Living the dream.
Yep. So before we get into it, we want to thank our new patron,
Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you so much. And for your message that you posted. Super sweet.
Yeah, that's very kind. We appreciate you. We appreciate all of our patrons. Now, we would typically share a review at this time, but we're actually going to start sharing our review at the end of the episode so we can get right into the story. I think some of our more casual listeners would appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that said, recently we talked about some stories related to MK and the human experimentation. Well, this week we wanted to talk about another horrific event with a lot of similarities, but one I really hadn't known about until this past week while I was watching a breakdown of the most recent Falcon and Winter Soldier episode. And it turns out one of the story threads was inspired by this real-life case. So that said, what are we talking about this week, Rosie?
Well, tonight we're discussing the human experimentation that happened during the Tuskegee syphilis studies. It began in 1932 when flyers started appearing around Macon County, Alabama.
Now, the info on these flyers could definitely be considered offensive during our modern day, but we're going to read what it said because it is what happened as part of history. But brace yourselves for some really insensitively worded phrases.
Thank you for giving me this part to read.
You have a much kinder voice.
Oh, thanks. The flyers had a large heading at the top that read, quote, "Colored people, do you have bad blood?" Then it continued saying, "Free blood tests, free treatment by the county health department and government doctors."
So obviously, back in 1932, before the civil rights movement ended, it was a different world. Even though the way they address people in this flyer seems really offensive right now, I don't want to say it was normal then, but it was more common.
Right.
But basically, these flyers at the time would have sounded pretty official. To use a modern example, the way it came across in the flyer, this treatment was on the same level of legitimacy that the COVID vaccinations are currently, offered by official government, county health department, and government doctors. You would think you could trust that.
Right. I guess I do have to put myself in the 1932 mindset because just reading it out loud, I'm just like, what the heck is this talking about? But right. Back in that time, it seemed like a legitimate type ad.
There was a lot more disrespect for black people.
Well, the flyers continued by offering a disclaimer, said, quote, "You may feel well, and still have bad blood. Come and bring all your family.
So nowadays, with the internet, it's easy for people to research things and realize that bad blood is not a thing. But again, this is a different time. Back then, people had to trust that what the government and health professionals told them was true.
Around 600 black men signed up for this free treatment. Many of them were very poor and couldn't afford proper health care, so they hoped that this would help them treat whatever illnesses they were suffering from.
And if free healthcare wasn't enticing enough, they were also promised free meals, free physical checkups, and free burial insurance. So on the surface, this almost sounded too good to be true. Like, why wouldn't you sign up for this if you had the opportunity?
The free burial insurance would kind of make me back up. Interesting. But there was a secret motive behind these treatments that was hidden from all of these people.
This was actually a clandestine study organized by the United States Public Health Service.
They called it the Tuskegee Study of Untreated Syphilis in the Negro Male. The intentions of this study were exactly the opposite of what they promised these 600 men. Under the guise of providing treatment, they actually planned to intentionally give the men syphilis and see what happened if they didn't treat it at all.
This is disgusting. Obviously, this is such a disgrace in American history. It even led to President Bill Clinton issuing an official apology in the future. But this is a complete abuse of the trust these people had in the medical institutions because they said they were going to give them treatment, but they just pretended to give them stuff that was placebos and watched them die. So it was a complete abuse of this trust, and understandably, it ruined many people's trust in the healthcare system of the time.
Understandable. I don't even understand, this mix of things they wanted to see what would happen. Like, why this specific group of people? Why did the skin color matter? Why did they want it to be syphilis? It's so strange.
Why did the flyers say colored people on the top?
Yeah.
And, well, I guess it just shows the lack of respect and equality that they had back then, back in 1932, which is not that long ago.
A class action lawsuit was brought on behalf of these people who were unwittingly betrayed by their government, and it was led by a civil rights attorney named Fred Gray, who had represented Rosa Parks in the past. He said, quote, "We have to continue to tell their story so that such injustices never happen again."
Yeah. This is just one of the many parts of American history that contribute to the struggle many people feel even now. I can't imagine knowing that less than a century ago, people were specifically targeted because they had the same skin color as me just to be unwittingly experimented on. It's not something I could ever imagine or relate to. It's disgusting that ever happened. And I think it can really help us all to understand why there's so much tension when things happen that appear to be caused by the same motives like this,
Right.
Living in the Minneapolis area right now, seeing firsthand a lot of unrest, it's pretty easy to be fearful, wouldn't you say, Rosie?
Definitely.
Of what could happen. It's scary to hear people talking about burning down our local neighborhoods and businesses. There could be kids or other people in those buildings. So I would never say it's okay to be violent or to harm another person or their property. Two wrongs don't make a right. But we also need to remember that each person's an individual. Many people with good intentions are filled with emotional pain over these situations and are peacefully trying to be heard and make a statement. So it's important that we don't lump them all together and that we never paint groups of people with a broad brush just because they have something in common. There aren't two right and wrong sides. There are millions of individuals just trying to live their lives, but, then there are some bad apples mixed in that ruin it for the rest of us. So I guess all I want to say is let's not let the bad apples represent two clear-cut sides and choose one. Instead, choose the side of peace, the side of life and love, and just see everybody as an individual. I think if each individual just focused on being respectful to their neighbors, unaffected by what they look like, we wouldn't have so many of these issues. I know that was kind of a rant, but it's been crazy times here in Minneapolis, and we try to remain as unbiased as possible. We just want peace and true justice. But that said, if black people do feel emotionally hurt and paranoid, be understanding, because this crap didn't happen too long ago.
Wow. Finger claps.
There's obviously a lot of tension right now, and it's something that's been weighing on me, because I feel like since we have this platform, we should talk about it a little bit. But also, I don't know what's right and wrong, so I don't want to take sides. But definitely there are good reasons to be understanding of the pain that people are in.
Right.
So, with all that said, do you have anything else to say, Rosie, before we get back into this story?
Well, not really. Just with what has happened in the past couple of days, I hope that there is peace. Because it was just so sad to see so many families' livelihoods destroyed, their homes destroyed, especially in the Minneapolis area. And going to stores where they were boarding up windows was very eerie.
Yeah.
It's a very scary feeling.
I know. And a lot of the businesses were owned by minorities. And that was their livelihood.
Right. So it was almost like some people were destroying the very thing they were saying they were fighting for.
Counterintuitive. And I think a lot of it was these bad apples using the whole thing
as a guise. Yeah.
Yeah, as a cover-up. Like trying to slide into this group of people and make it look like everyone's doing it, when it's really people that don't even care about the cause. And then the people that do care get misrepresented. Anyway, it's crazy. It's just a wild situation, and I don't know. I'm too dumb to know what to do. I just want everyone I love to still be alive tomorrow, you know? Anyway.
Back to the story.
Should we get back to it?
Out of the 600 men who were part of the study, 399 were diagnosed with syphilis. 201 of them were kept disease-free and used as a control group. They never told the men they weren't being treated and never obtained informed consent. On the contrary, they claimed to be treating the men with cutting-edge health care. The men were never even told that they had syphilis, but continued to be told that they had bad blood, blaming it on their genetics rather than the disease. The men were given a variety of mysterious pills, capsules, and vials of medicine, but none of them actually treated the diseases that they were diagnosed with.
Just so much disrespect for the right of these people to know what's going on with their bodies. Like, when you seek medical treatment, you assume you're getting the care that you're seeking, just like with MK Ultra and Esther Schreier and those lobotomies. Like, you thought you were getting
cutting edge medicine, something
that would help you be better by the time you were done.
Right.
But this was completely counterintuitive. The study was supposed to only last for 6 months when they started it, but it actually carried on for 40 years.
Whoa.
From 1932 to 1972. We'll get into how it ended a little bit later. One of the nurses who worked between the victims and the doctors was named Eunice Rivers, and there was some interesting stuff about what role she played in this.
Eunice would keep records of the men and drive them to doctor appointments in a government-owned station wagon with a government emblem on the door, keeping a close eye on them. There were even occasions where she followed the men to their own private doctors and used her government-granted power to intervene to make sure they didn't receive any real treatment.
So not only were they not giving them the treatment that they said they would, but they were preventing them from getting treatment from any other doctors.
Wow. And how could you do that as the nurse, as the doctors? How could you look these men in the eye and dispense these pills to them?
I don't know.
How could they live with themselves
absolute
like that?
Hatred. Like, I don't know. I can't understand it. But obviously, this is serious racism.
Yeah.
Like, to think it's okay to do this to these men, because like we've already mentioned, the flyers to draw people into this study specifically said on the top, colored people. They were specifically targeting black people. So it just shows how much disrespect there was for them at this time in history.
During the experiments in 1945, penicillin was discovered, and became a primary treatment for syphilis. But even with this new advancement in healthcare, it was never offered to the men who were victims of the Tuskegee study.
Now, 34 years into these abhorrent studies, in 1966, a public health service investigator named Peter Buxton got a bad feeling about what was going on in this study, and he actually wrote to the director of the U.S. Division of Venereal Diseases, questioning the ethics of this experiment, because obviously it was messed up. But despite his good intentions, the agency completely ignored him.
Having no luck by going to the government officials, Buxton chose to bring this information to the public, and it leaked to the Associated Press. But it took another 6 years before a front-page story in the New York Times revealed that these men had been untreated for 40 years. Finally, after that, the study was ended.
Can you believe it took an extra 6 years after it was leaked to the press?
I cannot believe that this was a study that was meant to go on for 6 months, and these people were like, no, actually, let's just keep it going. I mean, some of these people that were doing the study probably died at that time. That's 40 years is a long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, how was this handed over to newer, younger doctors with newer, younger ideas about, the times were changing and people were finally realizing how stupid. I bumped my mic because I'm so upset. It's just very confusing that this would go on for so long.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. Confusing. It doesn't make any sense. It's also funded by tax dollars.
That's
people who have no idea this is happening are the ones flipping the bill.
Like, these men's families were flipping the bill for them to have syphilis.
Yeah, and they were legally required to pay for
How absolutely disgusting is that?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
In 1973, the class action lawsuit was filed, and a $10 million settlement was reached to avoid a trial. The U.S. government promised to give lifetime medical benefits and burial services to all the survivors. Oh, thank you, because now they're really going to want these medical benefits offered by the government.
Exactly. As usual, this doesn't take away the pain and hurt caused by what happened. The survivors had to live 4 decades with a disease they didn't even know they had, and others lost their lives along the way because of the negligence of these doctors and the abuse, the abuse of power, that they were able to just not tell them they had this disease. While the whole time they're thinking they're being treated by doctors, so they don't have anything to worry about. But think of all the people who died along the way. Speaking of that, out of this $10 million, even to this day, there's still a big chunk of it that's just sitting in accounts because the people that it was paid out to were already dead.
So it's just sitting there? It wasn't given to their family?
Family members of the survivors and people who were involved in this were trying to figure that out to get the funds dispersed in some way.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's happened yet. All I know is that the money that was supposed to be paid to the survivors that weren't survivors anymore, they didn't make it, it was sitting in accounts going nowhere for a long time. It's wild.
It's very disturbing.
But just like MKUltra, this whole thing never would have stopped unless it was leaked to the public. If it hadn't been leaked to the public, it might still be going now.
Right. If it hadn't been for Buxton, who knows who would have caught on.
Yeah. Which makes it understandable when people nowadays have trust issues when it comes to governmental agencies. They don't come out and tell you when they're doing something nefarious, and when they do get caught, they just pay off the victims using the money that us taxpayers give them, including the families and the victims themselves who are paying taxes. They just pay people off so they can sweep it under the rug and forget about it. So yeah, it's pretty disturbing.
Mm-hmm. In 1974, the National Research Act was passed by Congress to prevent future exploitation of human subjects for research. When Bill Clinton issued an apology on May 16, 1997, there were only 8 survivors left, and that was out of 600.
Yeah, and you'd think that this National Research Act would just be a given. Human rights. You know, how stupid can we be as a species that we need a law passed to not exploit other human beings for research?
How was there not one before?
Right? Rosie, will you read this official apology quote from Bill Clinton?
Mm-hmm. It says, "The United States government did something that was wrong. Deeply, profoundly, morally wrong. It was an outrage to our commitment to integrity and equality for all our citizens. To the survivors, to the wives and family members, the children and the grandchildren, I say what you know. No power on earth can give you back the lives lost, the pain suffered, the years of internal torment and anguish. What was done cannot be undone, but we can end the silence. We can stop turning our heads away. We can look at you in the eye and finally say on behalf of the American people, what the United States government did was shameful, and I am sorry."
So, I guess it's progress, but it's still way too late. Like you said, only 8 of the 600 victims were around to hear this apology. Many more of them probably could have heard it if they were given proper treatment, and they could have avoided the physical toll of an untreated disease put on their bodies. But what happened, and can't be undone.
But the government is only sorry because they were caught.
Exactly.
So I'm not
That's the scary part.
That great about this apology. It sounds good, but when you think about it that way...
That's the scary part, is what do they currently have cooking that we don't know about yet?
In fact, when the 6-month trial was up, they decided no one's catching on. Let's keep this going for 40 years and counting until they got caught.
I would say this particular situation could also explain why there's a large swath of people who feels uncertain about current medical treatment that's available. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of real history that makes it difficult to trust what the official story is.
Right.
So, anyway, that's all I have to say about that.
Oof. Gives you the warm and fuzzies.
Yeah. It's just so sad that this ever happened. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know world history in general is very rough, and we're very fortunate to live in a time where we don't have to struggle just to stay alive. You know, we don't have to constantly be trying to survive like people did before the 1800s. But still, this is something that really should never have happened.
Right. And honestly, it was because of that Winter Soldier and Falcon episode that we even thought about it.
Because we're total nerds.
Yeah, we are nerds. I'm hoping a lot of our listeners also watch that show. To understand what we're talking about.
I'm sure some of them do. It's a pretty popular show. Mm-hmm. Anyway, do you have anything else to say about it, Rosie?
Not really. Just, man, our country history is kind of a drag, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Well, all of world history kind of is a drag.
Yeah.
But all we can really do is try our best to be respectful to all people and be understanding of people that feel hurt by these past situations and by current situations.
Mm-hmm.
And,
have courage and be kind.
Well said.
And Cinderella said it.
Oh.
That's my new thing.
Was that in the movie?
The live version one.
Oh, okay.
It was a very good, very well done.
I don't know if I saw the live version.
It's very good.
Huh. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm interested to hear what our listeners have to say about this. Obviously, we're just a couple of dumb kids. We don't know what we're talking about in a lot of areas. Mm-hmm. So we always welcome feedback from people who do know what they're talking about. Whew. All right. So are you ready to flip over and do something a little more positive?
Flip like a pancake.
Let's read this review.
Yes, let's read this review.
It comes in from Jin's Opinion on Apple Podcasts, and it's entitled Ryan and Rosie. You want to read that?
Mm-hmm. I usually only listen to one-person podcasts, and then I heard Rosie and Ryan. As a victim/survivor, I appreciate how truly empathetic and sympathetic both R&R are. Terrible grammar, but cute. As a family member of at least one still living abuser, I appreciate that they acknowledge that the abuser usually started out as a victim. One of my rapists killed himself at the age of 21, leaving behind a taped message saying he was tired of being hurt and of hurting others. Oh. That doesn't make him less disgusting, but it's a horrible cycle that Ryan and Rosie are helping break by telling one story at a time. Thank you both for all your hard work. Truly, G.
Thank you so much.
Man.
That's intense.
It is intense. Jen, you want to share your story? Let us know.
Well, I'm sorry that you had to deal with that.
Yeah, that's a deep review. Like, whoa.
I'm really glad that she appreciates what we do.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's she. I can't say for sure, but when people who have lived through things like this say that they appreciate what we do, it means so much to us.
Mm-hmm.
And, those stories are hard to talk about because it's so sad and heartbreaking. But stuff like this really makes it worth it and makes us want to keep going.
Right.
To all of our listeners who have shared their personal stories, we appreciate each and every one of those so much that you were able to put yourself out there and share it. And we really hope
took
that
the time.
We really hope that it was therapeutic for you, or that it felt good to get it out and talk to someone about it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, if you're interested in supporting us, helping us keep doing this, we would really appreciate if you checked out our Patreon. It takes a lot of time to create a podcast, and we want to keep doing it as long as we possibly can. And the best way you can help make that happen is by going to our Patreon and helping support us. And of course, we understand if you can't, because it's a really difficult time. But over there, you do get access to over 20 premium episodes that are already up and more coming month to month. And then as well, you'll get ad-free main feed episodes and priority requests, and even some of the lost episodes from before episode 18.
Ooh, the treasure chest of cringe.
Yeah. Anyway, again, we want to say thank you to our new patron, Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel.
You're awesome. And yeah, I think that's where we'll wrap it up. If this is your first time here, we're on Instagram at VOV Podcast, and you can email us at vovpodcast@gmail.com, and go join our Facebook group, Voice of the Victim Support System.
It's a chill place.
Yeah.
Nice little gathering area. Watering hole.
I think that's where we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you. Have courage and be kind. Bye.